Hey everybody, it's Tuesday, June 17th, 2025. Welcome to the NFL Fantasy Football Podcast. We're happy to finally see the sun again. It's me, your man, MG Marcus Grant, joined by LaQuan Jones. No Michael F. Florio. He is, where is he right now? He's somewhere in like the Pacific Northwest.
I thought he was in Canada by now.
I don't think he's trying to flee the country. I think they're just trying to go to Seattle. He's on vacation. He is driving up the West Coast, starting in Los Angeles. I think the ultimate destination is in Seattle. Last we heard from him, he was in Portland. I don't know if he's, becoming more hipster, getting extra tattoos and piercings. I have no idea.
Becoming a 49ers fan in NorCal.
Actually, if he's going that far north, he's heading deep into Seahawks country at that point. I would think that Portland is probably Seahawk country, is what I'm guessing. It's a lot closer.
A bunch of Cooper Kupp jerseys. Yeah,
probably. They're probably growing their hair out, and they're wearing number 10 jerseys,
looking miserable
in blue and green. They're probably living a pretty happy life. I've never been to Portland. Portland's a good town. So is Seattle. So
it's all good. I read the comments. That's just all I'm putting out there for I read the comments. Okay.
All right.
I see everything.
We are talking dead zones as we are in the midst of draft season. I'm doing a few. I should check in actually. Now that I think about it, I think I may actually be on the clock in a draft.
Oh man,
I'm not sure.
Don't be that guy, MG.
No, it's a slow draft. It's a slow draft, and I just went on the clock. Like it's not like I've been on the clock for hours.
Nah, I'm that guy texting OTC right now.
Oh, you're that person.
Yes.
Oh, don't be that person.
OTC right now. If you ain't penning the trade, make the pick.
Don't be that person. That's a note for all of you. The Scott Fish Bowl is coming. A lot of these big slow drafts are coming.
Yeah.
Don't be the person who's just all of a sudden like OTC as soon as like the person goes on the clock. Just because like I'll say when people do that to me, that just makes me want to take longer. That's all. Right? If as soon as it's my time, you're like OTC, I'm like, well, now I'm gonna just wait a few hours. I'm gonna go have some lunch, watch a movie.
Yeah,
I'll come back.
Enjoy the day.
Yeah, I'll come back and I'll get to it when I get to it now, just because you did that. So anyway, we are talking running back and wide receiver dead zones and all that kind of stuff about guys that maybe we like within those dead zones, players we're avoiding, all that kind of stuff there. So before that, though, some news headlines, I guess, news and rumor-ish type headlines.
Rumor-ish.
In Pittsburgh, Jaylen Warren says he has no doubt that he can shoulder a larger workload. Of course, the last couple of years, he's been splitting that time with Najee Harris. Najee is gone to Los Angeles to join the Chargers. And instead, it's Caleb Johnson, who was drafted by the Steelers and comes in to take some work in that backfield. So, LaQuan, who is the RB1 in Pittsburgh right now?
That may be a question that we will have to figure out in August because, honestly, looking at this backfield, like you kind of see the roles already. Like you see Jaylen Warren being the pass blocker, being the guy that's going to get involved in the passing game, but then you have Caleb Johnson, who might be in that short yardage and might be in the red zone goal line area. So this seems like a backfield that may be a headache for, a lot of fantasy managers this summer. So I would approach the draft like this. I would approach the guy that's going to give me more of the PPR upside, more of a guy that's going to be a little bit cheaper. And I think that would be Jaylen Warren, that could be the RB1 that you can attack, if you're looking to get a piece of this Pittsburgh Steelers backfield. But Marcus, for me, it's like, I love to hear that, Tomlin co-signed Jaylen Warren. They kind of acknowledge his work that he's had behind a Najee Harris, because there were times where he kind of looked better than Najee running out of that backfield. But, Najee still is a guy that can be the workhorse, that can handle most of the touches and not break down and be durable. So that may be a role that ends up for Caleb Johnson later in the season, but I just wouldn't be drafting Jaylen Warren with high hopes that he'll finish as the guy as the number one there.
Yeah, I just think both of them are going to be kind of, this year. I have been on the Jaylen Warren train the last couple of years, partially for what you said earlier, that in the last couple of years, he has had a better ADP. The draft price has been a little bit better. And at least the hope was that he would give you more PPR upside. Although I think in practice, when you look at it last year, I don't know that Warren had a huge advantage in the passing game over Najee Harris. I mean, you look at sort of their target share. It was about even. Now, granted, Harris played 2 more games than Warren did, but Najee had 48 targets, 36 catches. Warren, 47 targets, 38 catches. So there wasn't really much of an advantage in the passing game.
This is the stat you go, why, Arthur Smith? Why?
Yeah.
Just do it the correct way that us fantasy managers like it. Like, come on.
The correct way is the way we want it. That's the correct way to do it, which is, give Najee the carries, give Warren the targets, and then we can all live happily ever after.
It could be so simple.
You would think, right? So that does make me worried a little bit, though, about what it's going to be like this year, right? If we're sort of assuming that Caleb Johnson, I don't know that he fully assumes the Najee Harris role, right? Like, I don't know that Caleb Johnson comes in there and he gets 250 carries in year one. Nah. But I also am not confident that it means that Jaylen Warren's going to suddenly get 80 targets. Like, I just don't know that happens. So I don't know. I the more I talk about the Steelers, the less I'm inclined to want to draft any Steelers this year.
No, I honestly, when I hit these drafts and like I go through some of these scenarios of like grabbing like maybe a DK Metcalf, a Jaylen Warren, and Caleb Johnson that we're talking about, I don't feel great about the pick. Like, it's not a sexy pick. It's not a pick that makes me feel like, yeah, this was the one. Like, I usually make the pick and be like, damn it, when do I pick again to make up for this mistake? Like, that's kind of how I've just been dealing with these best ball drafts with the Steelers. So it's like, it's going to be a rough year, man, just trying to figure out what is going on there, especially with the Voldemort quarterback there that we're not going to say his name. He's signed.
We can say his name now that he's signed.
No, don't say it. This is what he wants. This is what he wants.
I'm totally fine not saying his name. That's fine by me.
The people know.
Everybody knows. We all know. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. There's nothing about the Steelers offense that makes me super excited. I know people are trying to, sort of put a happy face on the quarterback situation there. I believe Judy Batista wrote an article you can find at NFL.com about stories that you should not freak out over and a couple that maybe you should pay attention to. And one of the ones to not freak out over was the Steelers quarterback situation, pointing out the fact that, that guy did play better at the end of the season. I mean, once the Jets were pretty much eliminated from playoff contention, they started seeing better quarterback play. I don't know if that translates. This is a guy who looked every
Voldemort trolling.
He looked every bit of 41 years old for a good chunk of the season, and now he's a guy who's going to be 42 late this season. I don't know. I'm just not excited about what's going to happen with the Steelers offense this year. Meanwhile, over in Buffalo, Keon Coleman had kind of an uninspiring rookie season, and in fact was pretty tough on himself when he was asked to evaluate his rookie year. His quote was, "You want to know exactly what I see when that bleeps trash? You got to be better. Simple as that. You got to be more efficient here. You got to get out of this break. You got to stack your DB. You got to give Josh more room to throw the ball. You got to catch that. You got to make that block. You got to get that extra effort on the touchdown block. So if Jimbo breaks it, he's up the sideline. Just different things like that. Calling out everything that you're doing wrong to make it right." You do got to love a guy who is really honest with his self-assessment, right? You love to see it because it's a guy who cares and a guy who wants to get better. But now, having heard that quote, LaQuan, your expectations for Keon Coleman in year 2, and are you more inclined to maybe take a swing at him, considering you don't really have to spend up to get Keon Coleman?
So this is a situation where I love the person more than the player. Like, I feel like I'm going to be on this hype train for him for the next couple of years because he's always going to be out there in the media saying something that just makes me just love his character. So more so my expectations for year 2 is, one, for him to stay healthy, stay on the field and be able to show up and show out. That's what I like to say for some of these guys that take a leap. And like, you look at some of the stats, man, the 19 yards per reception is one of those things that just are eye-popping. That shows that he can have that George Pickens type of stretch the field impact. He can have that type of ability to put up some big fantasy points and some big yards. So we're hoping that, in year 2, Josh Allen can target him more downfield rather than a Josh Palmer or a Mac Hollins or who that was last season. Like, that should be Keon Coleman's role. Like, we should start looking at him more as a mold as a George Pickens rather than trying to make him a Stephon Diggs, trying to make him, these other type of wide receivers where that offense worked. So I think if there's some self-identity here with his role and his character and his impact on the team, then, I'm going to constantly keep drafting him because I feel like his ADP isn't expensive. It's not out there where you're going to be paying a hefty price for a wide receiver because he's going as like a wide receiver 4 or 5. Like, I'm not losing sleep over that. And again, I like the person more than the players. So like, I constantly want to root for this guy. So the self-awareness is definitely something you love to see.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously we love Josh Allen as a fantasy quarterback. He gives us so much. Last year, there wasn't a lot that we liked around Josh Allen. I mean, Khalil Shakir had a good year. I think he exceeded expectations. Although I think you and Florio saw the vision with Khalil Shakir last year. But I didn't imagine that he was going to give you 76 catches, 800 yards. I just didn't see that out of Khalil Shakir. I don't know if there's that again. The problem is, let's really think about this. I mean, it's been a little while since we've seen Josh Allen support multiple pass catchers.
Yeah.
When Stephon Diggs was there, he was by far the guy. I mean, you had like a year of Gabe Davis, which caused the fantasy industry to tear itself apart over whether or not he was good.
Let's not go back to that.
It was just wild. I just woke up one morning and all of a sudden Twitter was arguing about Gabe Davis. And I'm like,
it was on fire, like 5 a.m.
I was like Googling. I'm like, what did I miss? Did something happen? Did he get cut? No. Did he get traded? Like, why are we arguing this so much? It was confusing. But to my point, though, there's going to be a guy in Buffalo that we want. I don't know that it's going to be Khalil Shakir again this year.
Oh, no. You're doing it again? Oh, MG, come on.
I mean, look, I think he was a nice piece. I don't think the Bills are anticipating that. They drafted Coleman for a reason, right? Like, yeah. I think he's a nice piece. I think we have sort of seen the best of Khalil Shakir. Why can't it be Keon Coleman if he really is this self-aware and really this committed to getting better?
My pushback is the lack of chemistry with Josh Allen. Josh Allen, I don't think he trusts
buy him some
Keon
breakfast.
Yet.
That's fine. Play some Call of Duty or something.
The Cooper Kupp and Jared Goff breakfast does not always work for everybody else out there.
It works for everybody, right? Just like tight ends who play basketball are all great. Like, it's just how it works.
No, that's not always the formula that works. But I look at Khalil Shakir, like we'll get into later when we get into these dead zones. He's not the sexy pick, but he falls in that category when we used to take Robert Woods off the board, when we used to take Tyler Lockett off the board, and these guys were reliable. So, like, when we look at the characteristics of Khalil Shakir, he's a reliable wide receiver. I mean, look at the catch rate. Oh, my God, it's incredible. The best in the league. You got to look at a guy that's getting 100 targets out of the slot. Yeah, that's where Josh Allen feels the most comfortable, and he's going to be that comfortable in the slot because we go back to Cole Beasley when he's getting 100 targets per game. 100 targets per season. Like, it's one of those things that, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So, like, Khalil Shakir, his ADP is always going to be safe for me. So if I'm looking for a flex, if I'm looking for a wide receiver 3, give me Khalil Shakir. I know I'm going to get 10 points. That's all I really need from him.
I mean, considering where you're drafting these guys, it is true the expectation isn't really high. I just, again, I think with Shakir last year, a career season for him, the 100 targets. Before that, he had a combined 65 targets his first 2 seasons, and he gets 100 last year. I wonder whether or not that's his ceiling, and whether or not Keon Coleman, I believe he has a higher ceiling. Yeah. So I think there's a chance for him to
for sure.
It's
just more so if he steps it up, man. That's all we're hoping for.
Well, again, the first step to fixing a problem is admitting you have one. And he admitted that last year was a problem. So, now he's hopefully moving forward to get better this year. In Arizona, Trey Benson says that he and James Conner can coexist. He says, I feel like we can have two RB1s. Sure, I guess they can.
Yeah.
And this isn't shade on Trey Benson. I am not sure that Trey Benson is going to get an equal number of opportunities to James Conner without Conner getting injured. Do we even want the Cardinals to have two RB1s? Is there enough offense to go around to have two semi-workhorse running backs in Arizona?
No. And again, like you appreciate Trey Benson saying what he thinks could happen, but if the coaching staff ain't saying it, I'm not buying it. Like I understand you want to keep your name relevant in that backfield, but James Conner broke the curse. He made a deal with the devil to have a full season. I don't know what the repercussions will be, but somehow James Conner played a full season healthy. And I think, what led us, kind of the Trey Benson hole was that he's one of the top prospects coming out of college last year. He was one of the best, running back values in these rookie drafts where it was just like, oh man, Trey Benson's going to be that guy, being with the unreliable health of James Conner. But looking into the second year, there's not enough meat on the bone for me to be like, I'm excited about Trey Benson this year. And I think with James Conner playing so well, and again, you look at his stats, I mean, he's great on the ground and he's still efficient in the passing game as well. So it's one of those things where like, if it ain't broke, it don't need to be fixed. And with Trey Benson, you have to wonder, like, how is this going to look with a 1A, 1B situation with Kyler Murray being mobile as well? There's going to be times where he's going to be able to pick up those extra yards. He's going to be able to hand it off or dump it off to James Conner. This doesn't seem like a role that fits for Trey Benson to be fantasy relevant until we see otherwise,
Oh, especially if you believe what Kyler's saying about how he wants to run more this year, right? I mean, that is sort of been he did. No, he did. He ran more last year than he had in the past. I mean, he's getting, he's a couple years removed from injury, that sort of thing. The fact that he hadn't run that much the last few years was sort of frustrating for fantasy managers just because that was part of the reason you drafted him, right? I mean, he gave us that season a few years ago where he ran for 800 yards, something like that.
Something crazy, yeah.
Yeah, but he hadn't come close to it since then. I don't expect that he's going to just, run for 800 yards and 11 touchdowns like he did in 2020. But, if he can get 500 to 600 yards, if he can run for,
I would say 500 is a sweet spot. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, 500 to 600 yards, you get about 4 or 5 rushing touchdowns. We'll take that. We'll absolutely take that. So there is something about that. I was looking, by the way, and I was surprised that the Cardinals actually ran the ball more than I would have thought. They ran the ball almost 45% of the time. They were top 12 in that regard. And I guess I just never would have thought that off the top of my head. I would have put them in the bottom part of the league in terms of rushing play percentage.
They were top 5 in explosive plays as well, too. And it's one of those things of like, where was this Cardinals offense?
Right. Like, when did all this happen? Like, I was here for the season. Like, when did all of this happen? It's like the Marvin Harrison Jr. scoring, all the touchdowns that he did. Like
that was against my Rams. That was
when did he have 8 receiving touchdowns? Like I feel like
I'm glad they're forgotten. I'm glad those touchdowns are forgotten.
Man, so I don't know. But yeah, I do respect Trey Benson basically trying to wish it into existence that he can get this sort of workload and be an RB1 alongside James Conner. I'm not buying it yet. So we'll see how training camp goes before we can make any further evaluations. But count us both as skeptics about Trey Benson getting that kind of workload in 2025.
Right now,
Exactly. As we are doing drafts, especially if you are doing best ball drafts. In fact, I just made a pick in mind. I decided to not be that guy.
Who'd you pick?
I took Jadon Blue. I mean, it's really, really late in the draft.
He's in the dead zone.
We're
right on topic.
Is in the dead zone. I just took him. What round was that? That was the 11th round. I took Jadon Blue. So, yeah, I guess that sort of fits into the. I was gonna say, which rounds do you consider to be the dead zone right now?
8 through 11. And I say that because there is scenarios in team builds where I've actually had to look for an RB3. because I was questionable going with CMC as my number one running back. And then you follow up with a Joe Mixon with Nick Chubb there. And then you go to that RB3 spot. And then now you're looking at the 8th through the 11th round. I'm like, oh, geez, this is not really a good strategy if I have question marks at my running back positions in the first 2 picks. So it's like, what do I do? There's been a lot of team builds that I've been doing these last couple of weeks. And like rounds 8 through 11, that's where I just stamped it. I was like, this is the dead zone. It's a wicked out here. Like, it looks scary. Like, I kind of want to restart. Can I take a mulligan on my pick? Like, can we do that? Like, can we go back?
I get that. And I don't think you're wrong about sort of that later round dead zone. But let me give you one that's quite a bit earlier. I'm going to say late from round 2 until about round 5, right? And just because there are guys there that aren't bad players, but they're ones that we have questions about, right? Because like we've talked about Devon Achane and what his ceiling can be within the context of the Miami offense. We look at Jonathan Taylor, another guy that we have questions about because the offense and the quarterback situation, like what's going on there? I mean, I think Bucky Irving is a guy that we're all sort of in with. Josh Jacobs obviously had a very good year last year, but what's happening with Chase Brown in Cincinnati? There's Kyron Williams, who we have discussed quite a bit on this show. Breece Hall, another one that we have major questions about. I mean, I think even James Cook, Amarian Hampton, I think are guys that we look at and we're like, yeah, we see the vision, but there are also obstacles potentially to these guys being super, super productive in fantasy. And so while there's that late round, kind of mid to late round dead zone, I think there's one sort of earlier too, where there are a lot of guys that just, it's like, could be great, could be really, really frustrating too.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And like in those rounds, it could be scary with some of those names with Breece Hall, Kyron Williams, Chase Brown, just to name a few. But like, I feel really safe with some of the guys like James Cook, and Josh Jacobs is wildly underrated right now. I don't understand why he's the RB10 right now. He is literally ranked as my RB5 because I honestly think that people are just not really paying attention what the Packers had going on last year with that run game. I mean, Marshawn Lloyd, your guy, he didn't really, pan out how we thought.
He couldn't stay healthy last year at all.
Yeah, that too. And it's one of those things where I don't look at anybody back there taking those touches away from him because Josh Jacobs has put a stamp that he is a workhorse. So in that dead zone, like it's kind of like, let me just pivot to some of the guys that I don't have that question with. I don't have to question about Josh Jacobs or James Cook or anybody else like that in that tier. But you made a great point that dead zone could come earlier, but you still have options to pivot. You have options to pivot, to a different position. If you want to hit quarterback, tight end, wide receiver, et cetera, then I would do that.
Right. Well, that's the thing, too. Like with those running backs that I mentioned, some of the other guys available in that range, right? Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey are in that range. Like if you want to go with a tight end early, Brock Bowers is there. If you want maybe a second wide receiver, Ladd McConkey is there. T. Higgins is hanging around there. Right? I mean, Terry McLaurin is in that group. Devontae Adams is in that group. I mean, so there are other options. You mentioned quarterback. This is when you're starting to see Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels showing up sort of in the latter part of that range too when you're talking about rounds 4 and 5. So yeah, if you don't love the running backs in that group, there are plenty of places for you to pivot to find some help for your roster. You talked about the guys in rounds like 8 through 11 or so. I went and put down a list of them, and you can sort of pick out the ones that catch your eye either because you really like them or maybe because you really don't. But Brian Robinson, Jordan Mason, who I know you're in on, Jaylen Warren, who we just talked about a little bit earlier. I paired up the Giants backfield of Cam Scatterboo and Tyrone Tracy. There's Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, Zach Charbonnet, and I had to throw my dude Javonte Williams in there.
I'm about to say, you have a problem.
He was sort of the very end of the cut. I went through round 10, but he was like the very end of round 10 there with Javonte.
He makes the dead zone very dark.
It kind of does, right? It's like I have a little bit of a sadness, a little bit of a tear when I see it at the bottom of the dead zone there. But any of those guys that you have really strong feelings about one way or another?
Well, I can go on and on about Jordan Mason. We already know that's my guy. That's going to honestly just be without a thought of just picking him. But Zach Charbonnet, he's a guy that I feel like still holds some value as a high-end handcuff back there. So, like, if I was in a situation he had to be my RB3, I feel confident about it because Kenneth Walker right now is dealing with a freaking ankle sprain injury, and it's not even July yet. I mean, are we already here, Marcus? Like, come on. Because come on.
I was really about to ask, I was going to ask the question and you sort of answered it. I'm like, is this because you like Zach Charbonnet or is it because you don't like Kenneth Walker? And I feel like you sort of answered that.
And it's a split thing because Kenneth Walker, where he's going in drafts, I forget, I think it's like the 6th round. You take that pick, you're hoping that he stays healthy because he can perform. He could be productive when he's on the field, but it's just, we have yet to see him healthy. It's kind of like the James Conner story. Like, I'm not going to be hoping for his downfall this year, but I'm not going to go draft him. I'm not going to sit here and put myself in that boat again. But Zach Charbonnet in the dead zone, I really feel as though like you're getting a guy that is just as explosive, if not more than Kenneth Walker, because if you look at his explosive rate last season, it was higher. When you look at Zach Charbonnet, he can be involved in the passing game as well, as big as he is. He's very efficient. We saw the 6.6 yards per carry, I believe, coming out of college out of UCLA, and that was just pretty amazing to see that he kept that same energy as a rookie. So it's like, in that dead zone, you get a guy like Zach Charbonnet. You could fade the Brian Robinson Jr.'s. You could fade the Najee Harris's. All these other guys that seem to be their RB1s. I'd rather take the upside with Zach Charbonnet when I know that his name may be called upon and he's going to be able to perform.
Yeah, it's funny because that first year, I was kind of into Charbonnet because of that pass catching ability, right? He did a lot of that in college. Didn't do quite as much that first year. We saw a little bit more of it last year. The other thing I liked about Charbonnet is that he looked more explosive in year 2. In year 1, he looked just kind of like a plotter, and I was sort of disappointed by that, but he did sort of step it up, I think, in his second year. You said you're willing to fade Najee Harris. The more I look at this, the more I'm not saying I'm in on Najee, but I just don't think he's going to go away.
No.
You know, and I think that people who are spending a higher draft pick on Omari and Hampton are going to be frustrated, at least through the first half of the season, maybe longer, just because I don't see a scenario where Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman just are handing a huge workload to Hampton in year 1. Now, if we want to talk about year 2 and beyond, I'm willing to entertain that conversation. But in year 1, I think Najee's still going to be a presence there. And I think it's going to be a little bit like what we saw those last couple years in Pittsburgh, where it was Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, or sort of like what we saw with the Chargers several years ago when it was Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler, where I just think both these guys, you know, and there's a chance that they're both productive, but I think if you're drafting Hampton expecting that he is going to sort of push Najee Harris aside, I think you're going to be disappointed. And considering what the ADP is for Harris, I'm willing to kind of to pony up for that as a guy who's going to be like my third running back. I'm fine with doing that.
You know what it is? This is probably the first time in history that the handcuff is being drafted before the actual like RB1. So it's like one of those things, like if you draft Hampton, you might have to draft Najee just to have that safe regard because there's going to be a drop off with Najee. Yeah, you're getting the cheap ADP, but let's say he only plays 7 games as what that ADP describes, and then he just completely disappears because Hampton is playing so damn good. So it's like one of those things like, you have to roll the dice. You're rolling the dice here in this dead zone with Najee Harris. You're getting a partial rental. So if you need a guy just to be a guy and to be a zombie on your bench eventually, because I can almost guarantee, and I hate talking in absolutes. You know how passionate I get when I start talking in absolutes, but I just don't see myself rostering Najee Harris when the fantasy playoffs come around. It's going to be Hampton season.
Probably by the time you get to the playoffs, yes. The problem is Hampton going to do enough to get you to the playoffs, right? If you're rolling him out there, can he do enough to get you? Because like, that's the thing. You're like, oh, man, the fantasy playoffs, he's going to be great. Yeah, except that, you know, if you don't make the playoffs, then what? Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
You're screwed.
Then you're just sitting there salty watching Omari and Hampton go for $125 and 2 tutties while you're playing in the consolation bracket. Like, that's just not going to be fun for you.
There's huge risk. There's huge risk on Hampton. And I think once people start coming back outside for the fantasy drafts, I think his ADP will adjust. And it won't go up. It'll go down. Like, I think more people will be more aware of, like, the camp battle and then the beat reporters. And, you know, they always got to have some type of, like, burst about a guy like, oh yeah, Najee Harris looks great today. He caught an amazing end zone catch out of the slot. Something like that will be reported and his ADP will shoot up, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. One thing that we forgot to mention earlier during the kind of news headline sort of thing, but maybe one that sort of fits in this situation. In Las Vegas, you know, obviously we're excited about Ashton Genty and what he's going to bring. Raheem Mostert is there. He's very much out. He's beyond the dead zone even. He's kind of going undrafted in a lot of leagues. But you got Pete Carroll saying that they could use, that he almost expects to use multiple backs. And look, Raheem Mostert maybe not a stud anymore at this point in his career, but we know he's a home run hitter. He's a guy with speed who can break plays and you know, really move the offense if you need him to. Does that scare you off of maybe having to spend a late first round, early second round pick on Ashton Genty?
I'm okay with the early second round, but it's the first round pick that kind of bothers me because, like, you're seeing him ranked as high as like RB3, RB4. And I think with Pete Carroll saying this, we got to remember, you know, his days with Seattle. Like, I know we remember the Chris Carson and Rashad Penny 1-2 punch. And, you know, Rashad Penny just unfortunately couldn't stay healthy to be part of that 1-2 punch. But Pete Carroll actually handed the keys to Chris Carson one season where he had over 300 touches. And he handed the keys to Marshawn Lynch as well, that had well over 300 touches seasons. So I think Ashton Genty falls in that category where he can handle the 300 touches as the workhorse. So I don't look at this backfield as like one of the things where Mostert's going to come in with noticeable touches. Like, I think Mostert will come in at times and be explosive, but I wouldn't be surprised if he has less than 100 touches this season, you know? And the rest go to Genty and whoever else is there to keep, you know, the guy fresh on the sideline. So I think when we hear these reports this early, I think it's more so humbling the rookie in a way, just not letting the green flag alert, I should say, that obviously you're going to hand the ball to Ashton Genty like 60 times. Like, that's a given, right?
This is like when was it last year? We always see this with quarterbacks, right? Where it's like you take the quarterback number one or like in the top 3, and then the head coach comes out and is like, well, he's not going to be the starter. Just, you know, we're actually going to hand him the starting job. He's going to have to earn it. And we're like, you're not really going to.
All right, shut up, bro.
You're not going to put Jaden Daniels on the bench for like Taylor Heineke. Like, what are we doing here? You know, it's like, so maybe it is one of those, or maybe Pete Carroll is telling the truth. I guess we will find out, you know, when we get into training camp and we see sort of how this works. But yeah, suffice to say, there is a guy behind the guy who's had success before, right? It's not like, you know, it's not like Mostert is just some guy who's been a journeyman and has never had any success. He has had some production in this league. So
he must start.
So remember, there's certainly a possibility that we could see him get a decent sized workload, but we will see there. So we talked running back dead zone. Might as well flip it over to wide receivers. Can't really do a quarterback or tight end dead zone because, you know, the only
tight ends are a complete dead zone.
I mean, pretty much, right? It's like the top 4 or 5 guys, like the top 4 or 5 guys, and then everything else is like, yeah, good luck, you know, sort of thing. Yeah. And the quarterbacks, you're only drafting one. There's usually enough for every team in your league to get a decent starting quarterback, and then, you know, if you're drafting a QB too, then it's up for debate at that point. But when you were looking at wide receiver dead zones, where were you finding one?
So the rounds like 9 through 11 is really where I've seen like a huge drop off in like guys like we see on the board, like Kyle Williams, Marvin Mims. I mean, Jack Besh, like these are guys that, you know, you like, but it's like, I can't bring them in as a wide receiver 3 or 4 or have flex appeal on a week to week basis. You look at Luther Burden where Ben Johnson's very frustrated with him. Like, he needs to be on the field to get these reps. I mean, Rashid Shaheed, he is just coming back from injury. And like, these names just don't feel like good, secure spots here. So I feel like it gets really dark once you hit that 9th round.
I think that's right. I will also, because me being a little bit contrarian, we'll pick one out a little bit earlier. And that is sort of late 3rd through, again, late 5th, maybe necessarily. Ted McMillan, Xavier Worthy. There's some guys in here.
Zay Flowers.
Yeah, like DK Metcalf, George Pickens, Jalen Waddle. Again, guys that the range of outcomes potentially is very wide with some of these guys, right? And so that to me makes it a little bit sketchier. The problem is that also sort of overlaps with my earlier RB dead zone. So I guess that's why, you know what? It's funny because now that, as I'm talking this out loud, it's usually in those rounds that I'm looking tight end. I'm maybe looking quarterback if I decide to go a little bit earlier. So
rounds 3 through 5. So that's a good pivot. That's look, the listeners should be listening because in rounds 3 through 5, it can get scary. It can get scary looking for a wide receiver 2 or a running back 1 or 2. And like those rounds, I am looking for a tight end. I am looking for a quarterback this year. You could wait, but you could take some real nasty work there in that rounds 3 through 5.
Yeah, it really could. So, it's just a thing to sort of be prepared. And the caveat to all of this, too, is a lot of it depends on the draft room and the draft board. Because, if everybody in your league is, look, let's just be honest, right? In home leagues, there are going to be some leagues where quarterbacks come off the board early, right? So that means that in those rounds 3 through 5, the running back and wide receiver situation is going to look a little bit different. There are some rooms where it's going to be heavy on running backs. And so, rounds 3 through 5, you'll still have a lot of good wide receivers, or maybe it goes the other way. So some of it is going to be dependent on how the rest of the draft goes. But if you're just basing it kind of on current ADPs, that's where things get a little bit sketchy for sure. Looking at rounds 9 through 11 with wide receivers, I put a lot of names on this list. I'll just blow through them and you can kind of do what we did before, pick the ones that you have a strong reaction to. But Jaden Higgins, Keon Coleman, Keon Coleman, who we talked about earlier, Trey Harris, Luther Burden, Rashid Shaheed, Rashad Bateman, Kyle Williams, the ubiquitous Marvin Mims, Christian Kirk, Jack Besh, Hollywood Brown. Any of those, I guess Jaden Higgins is the one that jumps out as a guy that you have a reaction for.
Yeah, Jaden Higgins, Trey Harris. Those are the two guys right there where I think like you take those shots. These are the guys I'm willing to bring in as my wide receiver 3. They could play a flex, week to week, you'll just have to play it by ear. But I think these guys are having really good mini camps. And when they go into training camp, we're going to keep hearing more and more buzz. So I expect these two guys to come out of the dead zone where their ADPs are going to rise a little bit. Because when you look at Trey Harris, he's the prototype X for the Chargers. I understand people are all in on Lad because of his football IQ, his ability at the catch. He had an amazing season last year, but Justin Herbert had no help outside of him. So when you're looking at Trey Harris coming in as this guy that nobody really knows about, but he is lighting it up at camp, boy, I'm willing to take a shot on him as my wide receiver 3 who could potentially compete for Lad for these targets. Jaden Higgins is out there doing one-hand catchings like he is prime T.O. Jerry Rice out there with C.J. Stroud along the sideline. Like, I got to share that video with you, Marcus, because that just really just made me excited. Like, I almost dropped the popcorn. I was watching Lilo and Stitch. Father's Day, I was watching Lilo and Stitch, and I was on my phone just scrolling Twitter a little bit because the movie hit a little dead spot. But a great movie, by the way. But I saw that clip and I was like, yo! And, everybody was like, what's wrong with this guy?
he's really into Stitch right now. I'm not sure how I feel about Trey Harris necessarily. We had the conversation, was it last week, about the Chargers saying that, the wide receiver room is night and day from what it was the year before. To which I was kind of like, really? Yeah. But I do think there is opportunity there. We know Lad McConkey's going to get a lot of targets, but and Mike Williams obviously has a rapport with Justin Herbert, with them having been teammates previously. But we also sort of know what Mike Williams' ceiling is at this point. But there's nobody else really there that I think can suck up a lot of targets. But for a lot of the same reasons you are in on Trey Harris, I'm starting to buy in on Kyle Williams in New England. You know, we've talked a lot about Drake May. You know, Florio, who's not here, is the biggest Drake May stan among us, but I see the vision. Like, I understand what the Patriots see in Drake May. And again, this is a wide receiver room where there aren't a lot of solidified roles. Like, yeah, they brought in Stephon Diggs, and the expectation is that he's going to be the wide receiver one, that he's going to lead this team in targets. But there aren't a lot of other guys that you feel confident can just command a large target share. DeMario Douglas had a nice year last year.
Pop.
Yeah. But I also think some of it was just that the Patriots wide receivers were so bad. Somebody sort of had to take
unreliable,
the lead. You know, somebody had to take the lead there. And so Douglas kind of filled that role in a lot of ways. But I mean, who else? Mac Hollins, Kayshon Boutte, Kendrick Bourne. You know,
just give me Hunter Henry. Give me Hunter Henry in like the 16th
Javon
round.
Baker and Jalen Polk were huge disappointments last year. So there really is an opportunity for Kyle Williams. And, you know, without getting too hyped up on minicamp reports, there were a lot of really good minicamp reports about Kyle Williams. You know,
I need to see it though. I need to see the video and get me all excited.
There was a lot.
I can read it. It's great.
There's a lot of excitement about it. So, you know, maybe that there's something there. And again, with it being so late in drafts, spending a double-digit round pick potentially on Kyle Williams, and seeing if he can blossom into a guy that earns a lot of targets from Drake May.
Yeah,
I'm willing to take that chance on him later in drafts.
You know, Florio, he mentioned something on the last pod, and Hollywood Brown's there in that dead zone as well. And I've actually tested this theory if he becomes like an automatic smash there as a wide receiver 3 or 4, or even a 5 at this point. And I think I agree, because you do see his ADP discounted because of the injury. But then you remember who's throwing him the ball. Then it's like, okay, I could see why I'm willing to roll this dice and why I'm willing to have a Hollywood Brown come aboard, because maybe there is still something there in the tank. You know, maybe there is something there where he could provide for this offense to be a reliable target out of Rashid Rice, who's returning back from a major injury as well. So I do think that, you know, Hollywood Brown in that dead zone, he could be an interesting pick as well that I might be in on.
Yeah, I mean, Chiefs receivers, I'm not sure what to do with. You know, I think Rashid Rice is definitely worth a draft pick. Curious sort of the evolution of Xavier Worthy. You know, Hollywood Brown I'm not out on, but I'm also not super excited about. I'm just sort of, it's just sort of there for me. I
feel like the Chiefs wide receiver room is like a split between a retirement home and then like a youth camp or something, because it just does not ever pan out to be what it needs to be, you know.
It's like the Big Brothers program of America, right? It's like you have your older wide receivers, and then they mentor a younger wide receiver, and everybody sort of lives happily ever after that way. I'm out on Rashid Shaheed, but I think I'm out on the Saints generally, but I do wonder if we're going to regret that decision, if Tyler Shough is going to stand back there and just throw YOLO balls potentially, which would help Shaheed. I know how you feel about Chris Olave. I know you were out on Chris Olave in the best of times, so I can't imagine. Can't imagine you're in.
I was
now.
Ahead of that train. Yeah,
but
I'm completely out.
Can you see a strand of the multiverse where Rashid Shaheed is productive this year?
I think what we saw last year was kind of like the ceiling. He'll have his moments. I can't rely on him every single week, because that deep ball cannot just be the mash button that you put every time you want to hit the special move. And like, I don't know anything about Tyler Shough to be, you know, a Saints quarterback that could stand up and throw back the long ball to him consistently, because again, he's returning back from injury. He might not have that same pep in his step. So I'll wait a season. I think Rashid Shaheed is going to be here for another couple years in the league, but I'll wait a season to see if he gets that pep and step back. But heavens no, you know, and like there's a guy that's going around his ADP as well that I'm honestly out on as well, and that's Marvin Mims. He played 27% of the snaps. And you know how the fantasy streets work, MG. When I start seeing Marvin Mims getting the buzz now, getting all the love, I tend to fade because it's like, okay, you guys are doing the bad thing now. You're talking too much about him. Now his ADP is going to rise. He's in that dead zone going as a wide receiver 3 for some teams, and he played 27% of the snaps. That's the fewest on the team. No, I cannot do that.
I'm laughing about this because you are like our unofficial Sean Payton interpreter, right? And so like when Sean Payton is like, Audric Estime is going to get more touches, you're like, nah.
He's a nice guy.
It's like, it's RJ Harvey. Nah. And now, well, not now, but Sean Payton's been like, we're going to get Marvin Mims more involved. And you're like, nah.
You kind of have to just speak the language, and you know what Sean Payton's doing, man, because the numbers do not support what he's saying. You know what I mean? Like, even with Audric Estime, he technically told the truth. He did get more touches, but he disappeared 2 games later. Like, that's the truth about Sean Payton, But it's one of those things where I want Marvin Mims to stay cheap. I want people to fade him. Like, it's the same thing with Greg Dortch. I don't want no buzz around Greg Dortch unless it's coming from me.
So you're not opposed to Marvin Mims. You're just opposed to Marvin Mims at ADP.
Yes, at ADP, it's disgusting because it's one of those things like, you guys are late. Don't do that. Stop. Leave him where he's at. Let him be my wide receiver 5 or 6 or go undrafted, and I pick him up the week that I need him.
I do feel like, here's the thing. He's going to get pushed up, and he's going to get drafted in a lot of leagues with like, the sharps and the degenerates and the people like us. I do think though the ADP will come down only because, and this is my thinking here, it's mid-June and people are talking him up now and that ADP is rising. But what's going to happen is people are going to pivot off of him because we're going to get tired of talking about Marvin Mims, and we'll start talking about some other wide receivers, right? And so it could be that, like, it could be that. It could be, and not even just in Denver, but like the Kyle Williams hype is probably going to hit at some point. Maybe there's Rashad Bateman hype. I don't know. I'm throwing things out here. Maybe there's Trey Harris hype, and those guys are going to move up, and that might push Mims down a round or two. Just because of that. So I think he's going to be inflated for a short term. I think that number comes down.
There's one more wide receiver that lives in the dead zone as well that I think it's completely incorrect, and that's Jalen McMillan. Like, he's going as like wide receiver 64. Like, what are we doing here? Why?
I just think it's the number of players there. I think that's all it is. I think it's just the number of guys in Tampa Bay, when you have to factor in, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are going to get their targets. Then they go and they draft Emeka Egbuka, right? They still have to figure out how to integrate Bucky Irving, Rashad White. They're still going to get some targets a few, I guess, occasionally to the tight end position. I just think that right now, McMillan's the guy with the least buzz. Evans and Godwin Evans and Godwin will always have buzz. Egbuka is the new guy there, and so there's some excitement around him. McMillan is he's number 4 on the excitement totem pole in Tampa Bay, and so I think has a lot to do with that.
You finished the season so strong. That's so disrespectful.
I do like Jalen McMillan. I think he's good. I think there's a log jam. He is. But there's a log jam right now in Tampa, and I think that's sort of the problem, is trying to figure out how to navigate that log jam and trying to see who gets those targets there. But I think there's still something there with McMillan. And again, knock on wood, you're not wishing for injuries, but if somebody does get hurt, then that opens up a huge opportunity for Jalen McMillan. So I don't know. I think that's what that is for sure.
Let's go, J-Mac.
All right, that's it. That's a little bit of the dead zone. I'm sure we can sort of revisit this. We're back on Thursday, right? Yeah, when Florio's back, which he'll be back next week. I'll be gone next week. So we'll have to wait a couple weeks to do all this stuff there.
Yeah,
we're cheat sheeting on Thursday, right? I have no idea what we're going to talk about. Because we'll hold the movie until Florio gets back. Also, I haven't watched it yet, but
I forgot, actually. What movie are we watching again?
I have to look it up. It's that one with the
guy from Nothing to Lose.
It's the Luke Hemsworth movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a Netflix action movie. I'm like sitting here trying to look. Land of Bad. That's what it is.
Land of Bad. Wow. No, I haven't seen that one. Okay.
Yeah, me neither. So
Just keeping it in the family.
We'll all experience it together. So we'll be back on Thursday. I don't know if we'll talk about that movie, but we will talk about some things on the cheat sheet. We're always up for your questions too, as well. If you want to hop in the chat and talk about those sorts of things. So shout out to Gavin Kinsel for editing this thing and making it sound smooth. I appreciate you after making you having to do extra work for the show. So in the meantime, that'll do it for this edition of the NFL Fantasy Football Podcast. Stay happy, safe, and healthy. Do good and live well. Enjoy the week, everybody. We will talk to you again on Thursday.